What if I told you that the single most expensive mistake in business has absolutely nothing to do with how much effort you put in, or your budget, or even how talented your team is? It's a mistake that even the smartest people make, and it's all about getting one simple thing wrong: your direction. Today, we're going to dive into this idea of strategic vectors and the massive, massive cost of getting them misaligned. So let's get on the same page. In math, a vector is pretty simple. It has two parts: magnitude and direction. Now, think of magnitude as how hard you're pushing. That's all your effort, your money, your team's energy. And direction is, well, it's where you're pushing. Here's the thing. Two teams can have the exact same massive effort, but if their directions are off by just a little bit, the outcomes will be worlds apart. One team hits the bullseye, and the other one isn't even on the board. And this quote just nails it. The most spectacular failures in business, they aren't caused by lazy people. Not at all. They're caused by incredibly hardworking people applying enormous force. Their mistake? They borrowed a strategy that worked for someone else without ever stopping to ask if it pointed in the right direction from their own unique starting point. And that right there brings us to our first section, what we're calling the most expensive mistake. It's not about building a bad product or having a bad team. It's about choosing a perfectly good path that just happens to start from the wrong place. So the heart of the problem, the root of so many strategic failures, isn't bad execution. It's actually excellent execution of a misaligned strategy. It's the right force, just pointed in completely the wrong direction. And every ounce of energy you spend just takes you further and further away from where you actually want to be. So why do so many smart people get the directions so wrong? Well, it often comes down to confusing two very, very different types of markets. Each one has its own valid but totally distinct playbook. Think about it. In pretty much any business discussion, you're going to hear one of two kinds of advice. We call these half-truths. Not because they're wrong, but because each one is only correct in a very specific context. And applying one universally, well, that's where all the trouble starts. Okay, this table really illustrates that divide perfectly. On one side, you've got your mature markets, think Silicon Valley. Here, the playbook is all about find the problem and fix it. The problems are visible, the infrastructure is already there, and your big advantage comes from being more efficient. Now, on the other side, you've got developing markets. The playbook here is completely different. It's go where the problem doesn't exist. You're exploring white space, brand new opportunities. You often have to build the infrastructure yourself, and the whole game is about being the first mover. We're talking about two totally different worlds. And here's the kicker. Neither of these playbooks is wrong. They are both incredibly powerful. The fundamental critical error is believing that the playbook for Silicon Valley is just going to work in Lagos, or that the strategy you used in Mumbai will apply seamlessly in Berlin. Spoiler alert, it won't. All right, let's make this way more concrete. What does it actually look like when a company applies the wrong vector? Let's look at what happens when a good strategy fails simply because it's being used in the wrong place. So, picture this. A B2B software company, let's call them Connectly, enters the Southeast Asian market with a classic Silicon Valley playbook. They're A/B testing their landing pages, they're optimizing every step of their conversion funnel. The charts, they look amazing, but revenue is totally flat. Why? Because in that market, the big seven-figure deals aren't closed on a website. They're closed based on trust and personal intros made over a long dinner, things no digital funnel is ever going to capture. Or how about this one? A logistics firm in Latin America, Swift Haul, spends a fortune on a super complex, state-of-the-art CRM system. The implementation is flawless, but the sales team never uses it. Why? Because all their real work, client chats, price negotiations, relationship building, it all happens on WhatsApp. The company tried to force a formal system onto an informal, relationship-based reality. And one more example. A coffee chain, Urban Roast, launches in the Middle East with a points-based loyalty program. A classic retention strategy. But in a culture where loyalty is built on that personal connection with the barista who actually knows your name, a transactional points system can feel cold, maybe even a little insulting. The metrics might tick up, but the real relationships are quietly falling apart. So when we see these examples, what's our first instinct? We tend to blame the teams on the ground, right? We assume they just didn't implement the strategy correctly, that they failed to execute. But is that what's really going on here? Nope. These are not execution failures. In every single one of those cases, the team did their job perfectly. They followed the playbook to the letter. The problem wasn't the execution at all. It was the strategy itself. The vector was pointed in the wrong direction from the very start. Now, this has always been a really costly mistake, but today there's a new technology that's turning this old problem into an existential threat, and we're calling it the AI strategy amplifier. It's basically taking this classic human error and putting it on steroids. It has the potential to lead well-meaning companies right off a cliff at a speed we've never seen before. See, here's the catch with all these amazing new AI tools for strategy and market research. They have a hidden bias. They've been trained overwhelmingly on English language data from the US and Europe. So their entire understanding of business is based on that find the problem and fix it playbook of mature markets. And this is probably the most critical point to understand about AI. It is incredibly confident, but it has zero real-world context. It doesn't know if you're in Dubai or Sao Paulo, it just assumes you're in San Francisco and gives you a perfectly crafted, data-driven strategy for a reality you're not actually in. And this is why the stakes are so much higher now. A human making a direction error, well, that costs you time and money, but you can usually course correct. But an AI error? That amplifies the wrong vector at machine speed, embedding it deep into your entire strategy. Getting it wrong at AI speed doesn't just cost you a quarter, it can cost you the entire business. Okay, so how do we defend against this? How do we find the right direction in a world that's just full of misleading advice? Well, it all comes down to asking one simple, incredibly powerful question before you do anything else. What market are you in? In this new era, your most valuable strategic skill isn't going to be mastering some new framework or becoming an expert prompt engineer. It's developing the human judgment to correctly identify which playbook a market truly requires before you apply any force at all. So here's a simple tool to help you out. Think of it as a strategic compass. It's just 3 questions. First, is the problem you're solving visible or invisible? I mean, are you just fixing existing friction, or are you exploring completely uncharted white space? Second, does the infrastructure already exist, or does it need to be built? Are you plugging into systems that are already there, or are you creating them from scratch? And third, is your competitive advantage in efficiency or in position? Are you trying to be the best, or are you trying to be the first? And this part is absolutely crucial. You have to ask these questions first, before you open a spreadsheet, before you adopt some new framework, and especially before you act on an AI recommendation. The tool is never going to ask you these questions. It will just assume it already knows the answers. And that brings us to the core lesson of this whole explainer. Strategy is not universal. It is geographic. The specific ground you're standing on is what determines the rules of the game, the playbook that actually works, and the direction you need to point your efforts. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Before you execute any plan, before you accept any advice, whether it's from a consultant, a book, or an AI, just stop. Stop and ask yourself, which market am I actually in, and does this vector point in the right direction from right here? That judgment, that's yours alone, and no tool can ever make it for you.